The lost episode of Peppa Pig that never aired. The Pig family moves to a new house. Peppa and George explore the rooms when Peppa notices a door to the basement. Daddy Pig says they cannot go down there because it is dark and dangerous. But Peppa is very curious. At night, Peppa hears strange sounds from the basement. It sounds like children's laughter, but very quiet. George is sleeping and hears nothing. Peppa gets out of bed and goes to the basement door. The door is slightly open, even though Daddy definitely closed it. Peppa goes down the creaky steps. The basement is very dark, but moonlight comes through a small window. In the corner stands an old doll in a blue dress. The doll has long black hair and big glass eyes. The doll looks directly at Peppa. Peppa comes closer. The doll looks exactly like a real girl, only very pale. Suddenly, the doll blinks. Peppa is scared but cannot look away. The doll slowly turns her head and smiles. Her smile becomes wider and wider. The doll stands up and takes a step toward Peppa. Her movements are very smooth, as if she is floating through the air. The doll reaches out to Peppa and says in a quiet voice, "Do you want to play with me? I have been waiting for a friend for so long." Peppa wants to run away, but her legs do not obey. The doll comes closer and closer. Her eyes begin to glow blue in the darkness. The doll takes Peppa's hand. Her hand is very cold, like ice. Upstairs, George wakes up. He does not see Peppa in bed and starts crying. Mummy and Daddy Pig run to the room. They search for Peppa throughout the house but cannot find her. Daddy Pig remembers the basement and runs there. In the basement, Daddy finds Peppa. She's standing next to the doll and holding her hand. Peppa stares straight ahead and does not answer when Daddy calls her. Her eyes have become as glassy as the doll's. Daddy Pig grabs Peppa and carries her out of the basement. He locks the door with a key. Peppa slowly comes to her senses, but remembers nothing. She only says, "The doll wanted me to stay with her forever." The next day, the family leaves this house. But sometimes at night, Peppa wakes up and hears a quiet voice calling her. "Peppa, come back to me. I am waiting for you in the basement." A lost Peppa Pig episode that never aired on TV. Night fell upon Peppa Pig's house, bringing with it an unaccustomed silence. Even the crickets outside were quiet. Peppa lay on her top bunk trying to fall asleep, but something unsettled her. George, below, snored peacefully, but Peppa felt she wasn't alone in the stillness. Suddenly, from the depths of the house, a faint, drawn-out creak echoed. It sounded like an old, ungreased door, but it seemed to emanate from the very walls. The creak repeated, a little louder this time, and Peppa felt a shiver run down her spine. She cautiously peeked out from under her covers. The room was shrouded in gloom, and the shadows cast by the furniture seemed alive. The creak became rhythmic, as if someone was slowly and heavily walking across the wooden floor. The footsteps drew closer, and Peppa realized they were coming from the hallway directly towards their room. She held her breath, listening to every sound. The door to their room was slightly ajar, and a faint light from the hallway seeped through the crack. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then another creak sounded, but this time it was very close, as if someone was slowly opening the door. Peppa squeezed her eyes shut, afraid of what might enter. She heard a soft rustle, like the whisper of old fabric, and felt the air in the room grow heavy and cold. Opening her eyes, she saw a thin, writhing shadow slowly creeping into the room through the crack in the door. The shadow resembled a long, twisting ribbon, slowly slithering across the floor, approaching George's bed. The shadow reached George's bed and began to slowly ascend it. Peppa couldn't move, her body seemingly paralyzed by fear. She watched as the shadow enveloped the sleeping George, and from within it came a faint, barely discernible whisper, like the rustle of dry leaves. The whisper grew louder, and Peppa felt her eyelids grow heavy. The last thing she saw were two dull, glowing points in the center of the shadow, staring directly at her. Then darkness consumed her. In the morning, Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig entered the room. Peppa was asleep in her bunk, but George was not in his bed below. His blanket was neatly folded and his favorite dinosaur toy lay on his pillow. The parents searched the entire house, but George was nowhere to be found. And sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, if you listen closely, you might hear a faint, drawn-out creak echoing from the depths of the house, and a soft, barely discernible whisper that seems to call out a name. Peppa Pig, the guest with no mouth. It was a normal evening. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper, Mummy Pig was knitting, and George was playing with his dinosaur. But when Peppa walked into the living room, he was already there. Sitting on the sofa, between Daddy and the armchair, was a guest, a stranger, very tall, with a smooth, bald head and very large, round eyes. He didn't speak, didn't move, he just stared. "Who's that?" Peppa whispered. "Oh, Peppa," Mummy smiled. "That's our guest. He's been here since morning." "I don't remember him." "You probably just didn't notice," Daddy Pig replied. "He's very quiet." The guest didn't say a word. He just watched. His eyes were open far too wide, as if he couldn't blink. His face, smooth, with no mouth, no wrinkles, only emptiness and silence. Peppa sat next to George, but she couldn't stop watching the guest. Something was wrong. He didn't breathe. He didn't twitch. But every time she looked away, he seemed a little closer. At first, he was sitting in the corner, then in the nearby chair, then at the edge of the sofa. "George, do you see that?" she whispered. "He was farther away," George said. "Is he moving?" But as soon as they looked directly at him, he froze again, as if he'd always been sitting right there. "He never blinks," Peppa added. "Never." Before bed, she asked Mummy, "Will he still be here tonight?" "Of course," Mummy said calmly. "He's our guest." Peppa got into bed, trying not to think about him. But when the house fell quiet, she heard a soft creak and footsteps. She sat up. The door to their room was open, a faint light from the hallway spilled in, and in it, his silhouette. Tall, still, he was standing in the doorway, watching. Peppa held her breath. He didn't move, but when she blinked, he was closer and closer. "George, wake up." But George was asleep. When Peppa looked at the door again, he was gone. She slowly turned her head. He was standing by the bed, but now his face had changed. Where there was once nothing, now there was a slit, slowly opening, and inside, no teeth, just darkness, endless, pulling darkness. He didn't move, didn't speak, but the darkness inside him seemed to shift on its own. Peppa shut her eyes tight, pressed herself close to George, and then everything went silent. In the morning, the guest was gone. Mummy and Daddy said nothing, only smiled. "Did you sleep well, Peppa?" Daddy Pig asked. She nodded without looking at the sofa, because she knew he was still there, just sitting and waiting for someone to look away.